This is the Tallahassee Business Podcast, brought to you by the Greater Tallahassee Chamber of Commerce. Thank you to our sponsor, 223 Agency, a digital relations firm helping you maximize and develop your digital footprint. Check them out on the web at 223agency.com. Without further ado, enjoy this episode of the Tallahassee Business Podcast.
Hey there, Tallahassee. Welcome to another edition of the Tallahassee Business Podcast. We are awfully glad to have you listening in again today. We've got a tremendous guest with us. It's an election year, ladies and gentlemen. 2020 has had plenty of crazy going on, but don't forget, we all have a very important responsibility as citizens here in our community to get out and vote. And voting has begun here in Leon County in our August primary. And it couldn't be a more important time for you to go out and exercise your rights. So we have brought on an extra special guest to mark that occasion. Mark, no pun intended. We have our supervisor of elections on the podcast with us here today. Mr. Mark Earley is joining us. Mark, we are just thrilled again to have you share a little bit of time. We know that early voting has begun here. Mail-in voting is happening. You're very busy. Your team's running around the clock, but we appreciate your time and joining us.
I appreciate it, Jay. Yeah, good afternoon. The whirlwind has begun, certainly. We've been getting vote-by-mail ballots in, I guess, for about 2 weeks now, and today's the second day of early voting, and that's ramping up pretty good, actually. A lot of people are actually going in for some in-person voting, but probably even more are taking advantage of our new drop boxes. About the size of a regular blue mailbox, except they're silver. They're at each early voting site, and you can actually drop your vote-by-mail ballot in those boxes, and they come straight to our office. So, yeah, we're getting ramped up, and things are moving quickly.
Yeah, it's funny you say that. I was driving by the courthouse yesterday downtown, and I saw this contraption there that I didn't recognize, and I quickly surmised, okay, that's probably where people can skip the mail part and just bring it straight in, which is super convenient.
Exactly right, yes. Yeah, vote-by-mail is a bit of a misnomer. It's more of a delivery mechanism, and we get certainly the majority typically come in through the mail. But this election year, we've more than doubled the number of requests we normally get for vote-by-mail, so it'll be interesting to see how the public returns the ballots to us.
Yeah, that's fascinating. So, maybe before we dive into the particulars, let's start with your story, your journey to holding office here in Leon County. This is an elected position, one of our 5 constitutional offices, and maybe just tell us a little bit about your background, your career, and how you became the supervisor of elections here.
Sure. Yeah, I started working elections here in Leon County back in 1986. Jan Petrick was the supervisor of elections. He's since passed, God rest his soul. He was a gentleman, a really nice guy, but he had a problem with an election in September, and I started 2 weeks after that election. That's back when we had 3 elections in the fall, a first primary in September, a second primary in October, and the general in November. And I started then. He was out of office for a brief period of time while they looked into what had happened in that first election, and his interim, replacement, Jerry Moore, is the one who actually hired me full time, and I've been working in elections ever since. I've worked clear through the 2000 election cycle here in Leon County. Had a big role with Ion Sancho, his long career in tabulating ballots during 2000 and running the voting systems then. After 2000, I had a lot of offers to go out and work in the vendor world, in the industry of elections. And so I went and worked with one of the major vendors for 6.5 years, starting at the beginning of 2002, actually. And did election troubleshooting, certification, deployments, support, training all over the nation. From here in Florida, a big footprint here, but in Virginia, all the way up to Alaska, California, Tennessee, New Mexico, Texas, all over the place, Ohio, and many, many other states, Georgia, just lots of places. But then in 2008, Ion offered me my old job back. They had trouble, I think, finding somebody to fill that position, and I'd spent enough time on the road, frankly, had young kids, and so I was eager to come back. And so I worked the 2008 elections, and then Ion was, 28-year career. He was ready for retirement. And so he suggested I run for office. And actually, many supervisors across the state who I've known for many, many, decades, all agreed, they would love to see me become a supervisor. And so here I am. And here we are with the pandemic. And I'm like, what did y'all set me up for? But it's I love what I do. It's really a great feeling, and I think our staff feels that too, to really be able to serve the public, bring democracy here to the local level, and really empower people's voices through the ballot box.
Well, that is a fascinating career path, and it's interesting. A place like Tallahassee, here we are in Florida. Seems like every time there's a national election, Florida is always part of the conversation. Some
ground zero, yes.
Yeah, ground zero. That is spot on. But what's funny about that, and again, the presidential election you mentioned in 2000, much of it was decided right here in our community. Despite Florida's sometimes questionable election reputation, here in our community, we're widely recognized as one of the best places in the country for executing great elections. Can you just, again, with your experience, speak to how we've built that over the last few decades?
Yeah, I think we've always had a great tradition here of innovation and, looking for problems and trying to, meet them before they become problems. We left the lever machines. We skipped all the punch card ballot systems back in the early 90s that a lot of people had deployed. We went straight from lever to the fill in the oval type paper ballots, and that has since become the gold standard. Ion and, some of his key staff like myself looked at lots of different technologies, thought that was the way to go, and it served us really well in 2000 because we didn't have any of those problems with the punch card hanging chads and pregnant chads and all that kind of thing. And the system we purchased back in 93 served us for 21 years. We replaced it in 2014 with a new, even more upgraded paper ballot optical scan system. And I think it's state-of-the-art, cutting edge. But, we've had people from all over the world, frankly, come and see how we do things here. Australia's using a system that we built here. After I came back from the vendor world, we dove into this. Really, it's a chain of custody / equipment inventory / testing / election management piece of software that we designed and built over 3.5 years here. Many counties in Florida use it. They use it up in Canada, New York, all over the nation actually uses it, and the whole nation of Australia now has purchased that same system. And it's something nobody even knows about. It's called Poll Chief, and it really allows you to really track and have great security and chain of custody for all the different critical parts of elections and predict what's going to happen and even allocation of resources to each polling place. Really powerful tool, but it kind of automates some of the things that people used to do intuitively. And people would make mistakes. So it's based on a spreadsheet I started back with Lotus 123 in the early 90s, back with DOS-based computers, and it kind of grew into this thing. And even our voting systems, we've had good hands in designing that. We're probably most proud of our audit system, our post-election audit system that's now been certified for use starting next year as a better way to do election recounts in Florida. And that's garnered great attention, great positive response. It's the only election bill I've ever heard of, and I spent almost every day in the legislature this past session talking to all the people in the different committees, and it passed all 3 Senate and House committees and both floor votes unanimously and was signed into law by the governor about a month and a half ago. So I've never seen an elections bill pass unanimously, and that one did. So we're real proud of that, and we're really anxious to get that up and running. To really, you mentioned how Florida has a tradition of close elections, and that really highlights problems. But a lot of that, I think, is because of the old-fashioned ways we do some recounts. And this, I think, allows things to be done much more efficiently, much more transparently, with a whole different system as tabulating the ballots the second time. And you can kind of do that in line with the election. So, and you're doing it regardless of whether you have a recount or not. You're already just recounting all the ballots. So if it comes time to have to look at the recount, you just push a button, get the results. You can compare them. But you can also find ballots very easily that might have marks that need to be looked at. So probably too much detail for our brief conversation, but it's really interesting stuff. And we've just always had, felt empowered and great partnerships with the county commission to really get things done and be creative here. So it's served us well.
Yeah, the political science major in me just is fascinated by elections and the process in which we all utilize to choose our leaders. And, we're at it right now, like you said, voting underway in more ways than one here in Leon County. And, as you mentioned earlier, definitely a weird year. You got a pandemic going on and all kinds of different unrest across our country. To your point, close elections spotlight the work that happens behind the scenes, but also times of duress. So maybe could you just paint that picture of what this year has been like as you've been preparing for election with a lot of uncertainty around us?
Yeah, we typically elections you prepare for starting a year in advance. You got to get your budget together. You've got a long history of how elections look. You've got presidential elections and the primaries that surround those. You've got the March primary and the August primary, and then the general. And then in state government years, we have the primary in August and then the governor's election in the general. And they all have their different ebbs and flows. So with an presidential election year, that's always the busiest year, especially with March. And we had a very busy legislative schedule. But we had everything in place and we thought things were moving along pretty well. But then I started seeing the news out of, as many people did, out of China about this, this virus. And it looked, it certainly had the potential to get big. And so we ordered all of our PPE for not only the March election, but clear through August and November, very early in February. I saw kind of the writing on the wall. So we had all those supplies in place, but we didn't know how bad it would get in March. And I think Florida was lucky. We were the last, us and I think it was Indiana and Arizona were the last states. I may be wrong on those two other states, but there were the last three states to have the normal round of primaries without any delays. And we got it done. There were some hardships in some of the other counties, especially down south where the epicenter of the Florida infections were hitting. Had a lot more problems election day with polling sites having to close because not enough poll workers or what have you. I think we got through that election really well. But certainly at that point, the trend was set for the rest of this year. And we've been watching very closely what happens all over the country with long lines and polling place closures and all of that. So we've been, in Florida, there's 3 legal ways to vote. That's vote by mail, and it's got some variations in how that works. Early voting and election day. And so we, listening to the CDC guidelines and talking with our partnerships at the federal and state levels, know that, social distancing is key. So that really, frankly, means vote by mail in a big way. And Florida's ahead of the curve there. We've got no excuse, absentee/vote by mail. It's all the exact same thing. And so we really put the push out. In Leon County, typically we were one of the, underutilizers of vote by mail because early voting started here. That was another one of our innovations that at first everybody at the state level, you can't do that. And we're like, yes, we can. The law doesn't say anything about it. And they tried it and loved it. And now it's required. But over 40% of our turnout is usually early voting, and only about a quarter is vote by mail in typical years. But this year, we've been pushing early voting. Pushing vote by mail, but we've also expanded early voting to the full time frames allowed especially for the primary. And we're trying to stretch out the voting opportunities so people don't have to stand in lines and don't feel crowded, don't feel unsafe. We want to make voting a very safe option. And so that's really what vote by mail is all about. And again, you don't have to send your ballot back to us in the mail. You can bring it to one of our vote by mail drop boxes at all of our early voting sites, and we'll have those even here election day. The key thing about vote by mail is we have to receive your ballot by 7 p.m. on election day. So don't drop it in the mail the day before the election or 2 days out from the election. If you're going to use the mail, get it in the mail 5 days out at least, or just come by one of our drop boxes and we'll take it. But really, early voting, I don't expect too many problems for in-person voting. Don't expect us, at least in the primary. But, that's still 2 weeks away. Things can change. But I expect that in-person voting opportunities will still be there, and basically like everybody's used to. A lot of personal protective equipment and masks and face shields, and in early voting sites, even plexiglass screens for poll workers, and lots of hand sanitizer and everything like that. We're cleaning all the surfaces and social distancing. So in-person voting, I think, is going to be safe. But, when we did our big push, we didn't know what the situation would look like, and we wanted to make sure everybody had the opportunity to vote. So that's why we've had more than double our normal vote by mail request, and we've already surpassed what is a normal vote by mail return ballot numbers than we've ever had for a primary. So that's all looking good, and who knows where we're going to be in November, so we're going to keep that push up.
Yeah, that's just, again, incredibly fascinating. I like that, the way you frame that up about expanding the opportunity, the window to really sort of socially distance, spread out how people are voting. You mentioned a couple things. I'm hopefully going to do it today, actually, but I walk down to the courthouse, go do my early voting. What am I going to experience that maybe is different from a normal year?
Yeah, the courthouse was actually the first early voting site in the whole state. There's two entrances. You can either go in the back entrance if you're parking, say, at one of the parking garages there. You'll go through security if you go in the back entrance, and there's a drop box there. If you have your vote by mail ballot, you can actually just drop it in the box. And we've got some security there monitoring that to make sure that nobody tampers with it. Or if you want to come on in, you can go on inside. They'll escort you up to the back door of our voting room, and you can go in and vote in person. If you come in the front, we have a vote by mail drop box there also. But when you come in either the front door or the back door, we've got hand sanitizer there, lots of privacy booths, which is where you take your paper ballot and actually set it down to mark the ovals. But we're encouraging people to, at least stay in one privacy booth separation. But you'll come in, you clean your hands, you can go right up. There's been no lines anywhere. Go to one of our check-in stations. There'll be a plexiglass screen. The best form of ID to use is a Florida driver's license or, walking around ID, because we can scan the barcode off the back. And we'll scan that, bring up your voter registration. Make sure you haven't already voted by mail, to make sure that people aren't voting twice. And assuming you haven't, then we'll go ahead and process you through. We'll print out a ballot for you and give you a privacy folder. And you can take that to a privacy booth, fill in the ovals, enclose it in your privacy screen, your folder again, and take it over to the machine. You can slide it right in the ballot machine, and it'll count it, and you're off to wait and see how the results come out. And you get your I voted sticker, as always.
Which is an essential part of any wardrobe.
It is.
During election year.
Election year, yeah, don't go outside without it.
Yeah, a lot of misinformation out there right now, maybe you'd say, on the voting by mail process. For those maybe who aren't familiar with it, who, again, you mentioned how many people are doing this, probably for the first time.
Many, yes.
What are the things that people should know about that process?
Yeah, so there's especially in Florida, because election laws are done state by state. And so Florida, and in most states, frankly, absentee voting and vote by mail is identical. Some states do all of their voting by mail. They send ballots out to all voters, and they've got established addresses and that kind of thing. Florida, you have to request a vote by mail ballot. So for the people that have requested it, we send it to the address that we have on file. The ballot is, a special type of paper. It's got coding on the ballot so that, only an official ballot can be read by the machines. It goes out in special envelopes for special handling by the post office. And we typically send any requests we already have on file for voters, and that's usually the big bulk of them, we send out in a window that's from 40 days to 33 days out from the election. But then you can still request vote by mail on a daily basis if you haven't already put the request in. We accept those requests up until 10 days before the election. That's so we can get the ballot out to you and you can get it back to us, giving about 5 days each way. If it's within that 10-day window, you can come to our office and pick up a vote by mail ballot for you and your family or what have you, and they can vote it, and then you can, again, if it's within just a couple of days, I would bring it back and either turn it inside our office. We've got drop boxes in here, or use one of the big metal drop boxes outside. And, vote by mail ballots typically are the first ballots counted, because we get them out early and they come back in, and we've already tabulated, I think, over 18,000 vote by mail ballots to this date. And we have another canvassing board meeting to approve another multiple thousand volume that's come in since our last week's meeting. So vote by mail is a secure way to do it. We have a lot of protections. We verify the signatures. This past batch that came to our canvassing board, we had 15,000 ballots that were presented to come in. Of those 15,000, 50 of them had signatures that our staff didn't feel confident approving. Basically, if they have any question, they will refer those down to the canvassing board. So we received 50 of them. Of those 50, about a third we went ahead and approved because, myself, the judge, and the county commissioner, and my staff also have had signature verification training. But, we're the ultimate call on that, and we aren't going to reject somebody's ballot out of hand. So we looked at those. Staff wasn't sure. We said, yeah, we'll go ahead and approve these. The other ones we've tabled and waiting for cures. So if staff has a problem with the signature, they'll automatically send out, lots of different ways of trying to communicate to the voter to make sure that ballot gets counted. We send a first-class letter to the residents, to the address we have on file. If the voter has put in an email address or a cell phone or some type of a phone number, we are obligated by law, but we would do it anyway. We try and contact them by email and phone also, letting them know there was a problem with their signature. Please come to our office, or we will email a cure letter, which is an opportunity for them to make a new signature, scan in their driver's license or whatever ID, and send it back to us. And they can even send that to us through email or texting or whatever method it takes for us to receive that back to make sure that ballot gets counted. And that process carries on until 2 days after the election. Thursday at 5 p.m. is when that ends. But the key point with vote by mail is we have to have your ballot by 7 p.m. on election day if that's the way you're going to vote.
Yeah, that's absolutely fascinating.
Again, talking, Jay, and I just go on forever.
No, I think most people know a little bit about how their ballot goes from their hand to being counted, but particularly in a year like this, it's good for them to hear the full story. There's a lot
involved with vote by mail, and a lot of people, I think, initially, a lot of the feedback was that they were afraid to commit to vote by mail. But requesting a vote by mail is not committing to vote by mail. We'll send you a ballot. Then if it looks like around election time that maybe the situation has changed and you don't feel comfortable going into the polling place, you can use the vote by mail and either fill it out and mail it to us or drop it in a drop box. But if you do feel comfortable, just because we sent you a ballot, as long as you haven't voted it, you can still come in and vote in person. And even if you forget the ballot at home, we can look you up and see whether you voted it or not. And we'll put a stop on that vote by mail ballot, and you can go ahead and vote in person. So it doesn't lock you into voting by mail or using that one we sent you. You can still vote in person if that's your preference. But it's like an insurance policy. I've said that a lot through the media, that really vote by mail is an insurance policy for an election, especially in time of pandemic when you don't really know how things are going to evolve over the next coming weeks. So it's a good thing to go ahead and get the request in, and we'll send it to you.
That's a great way to put it. Again, it's always good to have a plan and a backup plan. So, it's really great that your office and others around the state are doing such a good job providing people so many options to make sure they can get their vote counted. But, primary or election day is still the biggest day of voting. I know you're expecting that to be different with this upcoming primary election.
Time will tell. With the volume of vote by mail ballots we're getting, and we're seeing the early voting pick up, I would not be surprised if election day, at least here in Leon County, but probably maybe statewide, the numbers turning out to vote election day might be the lowest of the three types of voting. We'll see. In Leon County, really, it's second after early voting. So early voting has been our top, and then election day and vote by mail. I wouldn't be surprised if vote by mail, or even the drop box version of vote by mail, that may well be the highest number this election. But then that would tend to leave election day the smallest number. I think of election day, and we've always said that here in Leon County, that's kind of like the last chance to vote.
Yeah.
We love people coming in for early voting. If there's a problem with your record, we can have even a couple of days to resolve that. So if you want to vote in person, come out this week or early next week. Don't wait until the last few days of early voting, because you might well find some lines. We don't want people to have, especially in this hot weather, we don't want people to have to stand in line. And election day voting, I can't control what polling places actually open or how many poll workers decide not to show up election day. We've already had several hundred decide that of our normal poll workers aren't going to work. But we've been able to go ahead and recruit new poll workers, and it's been a good partnership with the governor and allowing state workers to come work with us, giving them 16 hours of time off so that they can be poll workers. That's helped a lot. We've got several hundred new replacements for those people and have them trained up. So I don't expect a problem election day, but if there is a problem, then it's you don't have many fallback positions. There's not many options after that. So exercise your different options to vote beforehand, and then if that's the only one left to you, then I'm sure it'll work. But it's better safe than sorry to do things ahead of time.
That's very interesting. I assume, Mark, that the things you're applying during our primary election here will also all be in place for the general election in November.
Absolutely. Back in April, early April, we had 28,000 people were on our record as requesting vote by mail. At this point, we're over 70,000, so we've had a massive increase. And 44 at the time we did our initial mailings, we had 44,000 on the books. So our initial mailing was 44,000 vote by mail out, which was 40 days out from the election. This election, everybody that's requested it now, so we're going to be at least 70,000 as our initial vote by mail mailing. And so that's a lot more ballots going out there, and then we'll have a month still to get new vote by mail requests. So we expect that trend to continue at least through this fall, and we will certainly keep our early voting sites open for the full 14 days to give people that in-person opportunity and the drop box opportunity. If they don't want to go indoors, they can put their ballot in the drop box. And of course, we'll still have election day, but we've already had a few closures that we've had to send some letters out to. I think it affected 6 precincts. Not a big number, and it was manageable. We did it in advance. We knew what was, it wasn't the last minute. So I think things will still be available for, the polling place will be available for in-person voting for a large number of people in November. But, options, flexibility. Don't rely on that. Vote by mail is a very safe, secure, fraud-free in Florida, especially way to vote. Take advantage of that. Go ahead and get your requests in, and use it if you feel the need.
Yeah, that's a great point. Very well said. I'm always it's so interesting to me to see the difference between turnout in a summer primary.
Yes.
In November, obviously the presidential election. If you've got a gubernatorial election, those are really huge draws for November. But just to paint the picture, can you give our listeners an idea? What's the turnout difference usually between a summer primary, which we're going through now,
yes,
and what we'll see in November?
Everything flows in cycles. So in the gubernatorial years, the general election usually has anywhere from mid-60s to low 70s in the turnout. Presidential elections, the generals in Leon County especially, and we have some of the highest turnouts in the state, are anywhere from mid-70s or in the 70% up to, we've had as much as 85 and 86% turnouts here in Leon County. The primaries are typically roughly half of that. So for a general, we'll have a primary in a presidential year, we might have high 30s to low 40s is a typical turnout. In a governor's year, maybe low 30s for a primary turnout in August. This year, it's kind of hard to predict. There's like you started off the podcast with. There's lots of things in the news that are driving people's interest. So typically, without the pandemic, I would have expected a very, very high turnout in Leon County. I still do, but the pandemic has people concerned about getting out in public and all of that kind of thing. So it's really hard to say how that's all going to evolve. The March election was lower turnout than typically we have. But again, the tickets were essentially decided then. All that we had in the ballot was the Republican nominee for president and the Democratic nominee. And the primaries that had happened before kind of really had decided that. So there was not a whole big emphasis for emphasis for people to get out and vote. So it's hard to say what drove those numbers down, frankly.
A good way maybe to wrap this all up. What are some of the things that you wish our community knew about you, your team, and the work you all do in the Supervisor of Elections office?
Well, we've had a long tradition here of really excellence in elections. Our staff here is so dedicated to getting the job done. The hours we work around election time, we don't just work 2 days a year. It's everybody's been putting in out overtime and working weekends clear through this pandemic, really. We're one of the few state offices. Elections are critical infrastructure recognized by Homeland Security, and we've got great partnerships to support to protect your vote, to have the resources in place. And we've been working here at our offices nonstop clear through this pandemic with masks inside the building, just trying to make sure, and people isolated in the pods with social distancing, so that even if we get an infection, it doesn't knock our whole team out, because we've got to keep going. And frankly, I would just love for voters to really, say thank you to poll workers. If they're going to go out and exercise their right to vote in person, please wear a mask. It's an ordinance, but if you don't want to wear a mask, we're not going to force you to go into a polling site. But we do have masks available. But really, it's common and simple courtesy to our poll workers who are really courageous advocates for our democracy, that the courage to come out and vote and see so many people in such close proximity during election time to make sure our democracy carries forward. That's just a tremendous show of courage. So I think I would love to see everybody wear a mask, no matter what you want to do anywhere else. It's just a simple courtesy to our poll workers, many of whom are very much in the at-risk groups. There are grandmothers and grandfathers, frankly, and we want to have them protected.
Well, again, not enough appreciation goes to your team, to our poll workers, those who volunteer. It takes a community effort to pull an election off, and kudos to you and those who do it professionally, as well as those who give their time, and especially right now, their ability to go out and help others exercise their right. It really is something that's an incredible and incredible part of our society, and something we probably don't put in awe quite enough. But it is pretty impressive. We appreciate that work.
Well, and thanks to you, and I've been on lots of podcasts and Zoom meetings trying to get that message out. So it's partnerships like this that really allow us to get the word out, and especially with the changing face of elections this year, it's important to be in front of the people and get those messages out. So thank you very much for the opportunity.
No doubt about it. Ladies and gentlemen, Mark Earley, our supervisor of elections, hopefully you will get out. You will get a chance to go and vote soon. A lot of options out there. If you want to find out more about how you can exercise your right to vote in our local elections and in the state and national elections happening this year, you can visit leonvotes.org, where you can find all of that information, your polling place, where early voting takes place, how you can request a mail-in ballot or a drop-off ballot, maybe we should say. Lots of opportunities, folks. You got to get out there and exercise your right. It's too important to overlook. And again, Mark Earley, thanks for being with us. We sure do appreciate you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, as always, you can find out everything that we're doing here at the Greater Tallahassee Chamber of Commerce, including our new 2020 local candidate guide. We have a brand new guide out that gives you an opportunity to hear directly from the candidates who are seeking local office in their own words, how they feel about their various priorities and issues that they're inspired to run for office about. That is available at our website at www.talchamber, that's T-A-L chamber.com. We encourage you, as always, to subscribe to the podcast, tell your friends about it, and go out and exercise your right as a citizen in our great nation and state and community to vote. Thanks for being with us. We appreciate you as always. Thanks for tuning in. Let's get out and vote, folks.